Hi, I'm Mayor Marty Walsh, and I want to thank Toy Burton and DeeDee's Cry for the incredible work they do in the Boston community all year long. And I want to thank all of them for organizing this event today. Mental health is just as important as physical health, and seeking and accepting help is a sign of strength. That's especially true right now. The pandemic has added a whole new set of challenges to everyday life. For people who were struggling before, it can even be harder to manage this added weight. I'm here to tell you it's okay to feel fear and anxiety. We'll feel that for some time. This is an important time to take care of yourself. We're all handling this the best we can. And the only thing we can do is take one day at a time. If you need someone to talk to, you have options. You can call your healthcare provider to get set up with a telehealth counselor. Or you can call 311 at the city, our hotline, to get connected to anonymous counseling over the phone. I know that DeeDee's Cry is going to share some important resources with you today. I want to thank the panelists for coming together and sharing their stories. In times like these, it's important to support one another and find ways to connect. I wish you all the very best, and I thank you for creating a positive change in our community.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Marty Walsh. Hello, everyone. Glad you're here with us tonight. My name is greetings from Albany, New York. They get the first what's up tonight. Thank you for tuning in here live on Facebook. DeeDee's Cry with you tonight as we present Men Have Feelings Too, Black Love and Relationships. Before we greet our panelists and our hosts and moderators, just want to also thank the sponsors. Without sponsors, we would not be able to bring these wonderful information to you for free. So we want to send out thanks to Roxbury Unity Parade, also Java with Jimmy, and also the Louis D. Brown Peace Institute is the fiscal sponsor of DeeDee's Cry, as well as Callaway Graphics for the design of the flyer. So tonight, Men Have Feelings Too. We have a full lineup of panelists for us tonight. Want to send our greetings out to Carlos Henriquez is with us tonight. And I'm just reading, not in any order, not in any particular order. Darren Howell, Adam Walker, Darrell Slim Weathers, Chance Santos, Christian White, Carlos Henriquez. Did I see that already? Also, our moderators tonight is Dr. Brandy Brooks, as well as Toy Burton. So let's give our attention to Toy Burton as we continue on with tonight's evening.
Hi, everyone. Like Robin said, my name is Toy Burton, and I am the founder and executive director of DeeDee's Cry. And I do want to say good evening and thank you to all the gentlemen on this platform that we will hear from in a few minutes. I started DeeDee's Cry in 2017 after I noticed that organizations that focus on mental health and suicide prevention really didn't do their events in communities of color. DeeDee's Cry is named after my sister, Denita Shayne Morris, who died by suicide when she was 23 years old in 1986. So DeeDee's Cry make events about mental health education and suicide prevention for people of color. Again, happy Black History Month. And like Robin said, all our events for the community is free. If you support DeeDee's Cry and want to help us and support us, please go to our website and hit the donate button. And thank you so much for joining us this evening. Yes. Thank you, James. And I would like to turn it over to Dr. Brandy Brooks.
Good evening, everyone. Happy Black History Month. Happy Valentine's Day. And on Monday, happy President's Day. Long weekend. My name is Dr. Brandy Brooks. For those of you who have never joined a DeeDee's Cry event, I am and have been in the mental health, public health space for about 16 years now, doing trainings, contract managing, even running phone lines, everything. And I got my doctorate in 2019 in education. And tonight I'm going to be moderating this panel. Before I begin any panel, even though I don't think we're going to need it this evening, I always want to start with a disclaimer that if at any point anything we talk about hits a little too close to home for you, please feel free to take a moment to pause, to take a break, step away from the screen, and then rejoin us, okay? So with that, I'm so excited tonight to talk about Black love, because Black love is rooted in resilience and hope. You know, from the stories during the times of slavery, when it was against the law for Black men and women to marry, to right after slavery was abolished, you know, Black men walked for months and hundreds of miles across states and plantations looking for their wives. Their love may not have been legal, but it was real. So too is like the love that's portrayed in the OWN Network's Black Love series, or Good Times, The Jeffersons, Family Matters, you know, or movies like Mahogany, The Photograph, Love Jones, The Best Man, Love and Basketball, Moonlight, Brothers. You know, when we're talking tonight, remember, love can be affectionate, enduring, familial, romantic, playful, obsessive, selfless, and last but not least, love of self. So tonight we're going to discuss all the different types, but we'll probably focus primarily on romantic love, from the stages of infatuation to marriage and divorce. So we'll talk about the pain and the joy, because love is nuanced, and how we experience it, how we define it, how we receive it, how we give it, how we nurture it is different for each of us. You know, James Baldwin once said, "Love takes off the mask we fear we cannot live without and know we cannot live within." So, inspired by James Baldwin, I ask our panelists and anyone listening or watching tonight to take off our masks, and let's have a fearless, no judgment, authentic conversation about love. So welcome into this space. Now let's get started. To start with, I'd like for each of our panelists to introduce themselves. Gentlemen, please briefly share your name, your title, or what you do, and your current relationship status. So I'll start with Carlos.
Good evening. Thanks for having me. Happy to be part of this panel. To be brief, my name is Carlos Henriquez. I don't really, the titles, I guess. I'm a son, a brother, all the kind of relationships that you just described, but my relationship status would be currently engaged, happily engaged.
All right. All right. Welcome into this space. Christian, could you introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. Toy, Brandy, everybody, as always, thank you for allowing me to be on these panels. My name's Christian White. Not really into the titles either. I'll follow Carlos. I'm a brother, a son, a father, especially a father. And I am a life partner to a beautiful woman. So that means I am not single.
All right. Darren, Brother Darren, could you introduce yourself? You're muted, Darren.
If we don't have one of those at least one time throughout this experience, then it's not a proper Zoom. But thank you, DeeDee, for hosting this conversation. Fellas and ladies, thank you for allowing me to be a part of this dialogue. My name's Darren Howell. For the purpose, on the flyer it says I'm the president of Drive Boston, but as my fellow brother said, you know, I'm a man, I'm a father. I am taking, I am not single. I'm with I want to say a life partner as well. We've been knowing each other, best friends since for over 20 years. So yeah, I'm taken as well.
All right, Brother James, if you could introduce yourself, give your name, your title, and what's your relationship status?
So my name is James Hills. I guess in the context of this, I'm the digital director for DeeDee's Cry. So I will say that as far as the title. Dr. Brandy, what was the second question again?
Your relationship status. Don't play.
So my relationship status is fluid, and I'll have an update. Yeah.
Okay. And Adam, if you could introduce yourself, your name, your title, and your current relationship status.
Hi, my name is Adam Walker. I am a senior sustainability manager. I'm also a minister, and I'm also a construction project manager and architect. And my relationship status is single.
All right. So welcome everyone listening. Welcome our panelists. I'm glad to be here moderating this evening. So my first question / statement is more of a fill in the blank for all the panelists. Finish this sentence. Love is ... James, I'll go to you first.
Love is unreal. It's amazing. I'm saying it's we talked a few minutes ago about, well, anyway, love is, I'll just sum it up as that. It's amazing.
Adam, love is.
Love is work. Yeah, love is hard work, but it's worth it. It's absolutely the most amazing thing ever. Definitely takes being intentional and working hard.
Okay. Brother Darren, love is.
Love is a commitment. Yeah, commitment. This is going to be interesting because this is the first time having one of these dialogues. So I like the way this is going already. So yeah, commitment.
All right. Christian, love is.
Love is when you want for another what you want for yourself.
Okay. Carlos, love.
Oh man, Christian came with that Love Jones vibe right
Okay.
there.
All right. I want the snap.
I would say love is what you make it. However you define it for yourself, and then you'll hopefully find a partner that defines it similarly, and you guys will work on it together. But I think it's what you make it.
Okay. So this question is for everyone, and it's not, we won't go person by person. So jump in where you feel. But what were your examples of love growing up? Whoever's feeling that question first.
So for me personally, I was always taught growing up that love meant you were being used for a particular purpose. And then when that purpose wasn't needed anymore, you were put on the shelf, and then you were worthy or loved again when you were needed again. And I speak on that in terms of traumatic childhood, in terms of being abused. That's what the first concepts of love that I had.
Anyone else? What were your examples of love growing up?
I want to say my example of love was my parents. I'm the last of 13, and my parents have a 20-year age gap between them, and there's 10 other children prior to their relationship. So to see that type of commitment, I only felt love was the glue that bonded them together.
I would say my first examples of love would be my parents, being the middle child of three, and then also being the younger brother of an older brother. So I think those kind of experiences tie together as what familiar love looked like for me as a kid.
James or Adam?
I would say my first example of love would probably be my what I understand of love now would probably be my grandparents.
In what ways, James?
It was just the old school, like on real. He brought home the check. I remember him getting up every morning at like 5:30, but she every night would put his stuff on the table and their little smart comments. And he went blind in the middle of his marriage. She didn't leave him. He became a diabetic on dialysis. And she didn't leave him. I mean, it was like 40 years into it, but I'm saying, you know, so I think that's one of my first initial truest examples of love.
Adam?
I would say my parents. They were like a tag team, and they both brought something different to the table with each other, and then with us, and how they raised us, and how they showed us how much they loved us and supported us. And they brought different types of love. I remember growing up, my dad was big on sports. And so we were all athletes. And so he had that bond with us, and he was able to be there and talk basketball and talk football with us. But my mom wasn't into sports. She was that annoying parent at the games. But she came and she supported. And then she had things like, she made sure we were good for prom and graduation, and the dance, and made sure that we were in love with who we were, and in history. She got me into poetry and Black history. And so the way that they showed love was completely different, but it was necessary to help mold us into who we have become.
So based on those examples and based on kind of your individual collective journeys with love, at any point in your life, have you had to redefine what love is and what it is not?
Absolutely. I just said based on what I know now. I would say that. Somebody in the comments said holding hands with the first girlfriend. I challenge to say they probably really think different now. So, yes, it's changed. I don't know about the other one, but yeah.
How has it changed for you? In what ways?
It fluctuated. I mean, this isn't real time. So my initial understanding of love, I would say, would be somewhat on what Christian said, which comes through a lens of, I would say, the eros. I don't think we have children watching tonight. So if we understand there are three types of love: eros, agape, and phileo. Eros being erotic, agape being unconditional, phileo being brotherly, Philadelphia brotherly love, And in my particular case, if we were kind of talking about love, my first experience would be in an inappropriate eros arena. Let's just say that. And so that was that love. But then in thinking in the evolvement, I think of my grandparents. But as I'm getting older, I'm like, I can appreciate the small things and whatnot. So I'll leave that at that. It's fluid. As I said before, some people think I'm joking, but the evolvement of love is definitely fluid.
How has love evolved for anyone else? How's it changed?
I mean, I think it evolves as you evolve, or as your I guess as you mature. I guess what we would call it, right? Maturity. So I can remember, my relation to romance and being romantic as a teenager, and how I defined it, or even thinking about my parents as being that first example. There's one way you experience them as a child, and then there's another once you have a different relation point. Once you've been in your own romantic relationships, you might then look at their relationships differently. You might draw from it as you try to shape your own identity. So the older I've gotten and the more experienced I've been, and the more in love with myself I've become, the more vulnerable I've been able to be, and the more depth I've been able to explore in my romantic relationships. So I've seen all those evolve kind of as I have evolved.
Yeah, I would like to piggyback off of some of the things that they have said in regards to just the maturity and understanding of a connection to someone else. What is that connection based upon? I recognize love can't be forced. It's something that, for me anyway, it's not forced. Like, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. And I believe it grows. It's constant work to make sure that it's sustained. So for me, I think that as I grew, I knew that I couldn't create love. I think love had to be there. And if it was going to be there, it would just manifest in what it is, versus trying to create it by being something that maybe I did not necessarily, I wasn't being honest with myself to obtain what I was maybe looking for in someone else. So true love, I think, is just genuine. There's no cookie cutter approach to it, just being what it is.
I agree with what Darren said. It's not a cookie cutter.
You spoke about the different kinds of love and the different ways it can be expressed. I think for me, love ultimately began to manifest when I became selfish to the point that I truly went on my journey to become my authentic self. Once I became my authentic self, I saw that whether it was love with my partner, love for my son, love for anybody else, I saw that it was from a place of pure giving instead of giving for something specific in return, whether it was validation, worth, whatever the case may be. When I started turning inward and loving myself, it automatically reflected back out appropriately in all of my relationships.
I think love for me has evolved as well. I've been through some really tough situations, and it made me step back and really look at love differently. And there are things outside of just my relationships that really taught me love. I remember my dad had this best friend, and my dad's a pastor, and he had a best friend who every Sunday, no matter what, would take my dad out to dinner. My mom cooked every Sunday, huge meals, but his love for my dad was that was his bond, that was his relationship, that's what they did. And he took him out, and that was something that taught me that it was okay to really love your friends and really express your love for your friends. Like I tell my female friends that I love them, I tell my male friends that I love them. I never want a day to go by without them knowing that I love them. And that perspective for me was vitally important, especially when I went through a divorce and I had to find myself, and I had to really dive deep into a space of like, who are you and what is love for you? And I challenged myself. I challenged the ways that I thought. I challenged the ways that I thought about love. I challenged the person that I had become during that time. And I truly positioned myself to make sure that love was driving my relationships, my friendships, and everything.
So I saw a lot of comments, people coming, typing about their definitions, how they define love, how they perceive love, whether it's going down south for family, being selfless. I saw someone type in pain, pleasure, and patience. And someone saying love is not always the answer. And so I'm seeing like the mix between the joy and the pain. And so my next question for you is love always unconditional? And does it always last?
I'm going to jump right in and say no. I'm going to challenge the belief that I know it's a popular belief that we say love is unconditional, whether it's Christian faith and we're basing it on God, or whether it's just kind of what we've picked up. But I believe that love does have conditions. I believe that you should, you want it to be in a healthy form, as we spoke about earlier. You want to make sure, you have a minimum of expectations you want to be met. You have your own love language of how you want to be shown love, and you have your own style of how you show love. And so all those things have to be met with another person if that relationship's going to be successful. And those are conditions. So, accepting abuse, accepting certain things that would be considered deal breakers or red flags, I don't believe that part of it can be defined as love, or should be defined as love, in terms of being unconditional.
Yeah, and I think that I think if we look at the word love in itself as an action word, right, it's a verb, that it has to come with conditions in order for it to be applied from you, right? Like that's how I look at the word of love. Like it has to be some conditions set to how you give love, or even how you receive love, because all love is not necessarily welcomed either, right? So knowing that, I believe the unconditional says there's no limits, is a great expression to try to communicate how much you care for someone. It sounds good, but there's conditions with love, because it's an action, so it cannot, or it can be applied.
I agree with Darren. Love is definitely, we grew up hearing that. And just to point to Carlos, y'all know he used to be a church boy. even in the church, they had to, there wasn't an assumption that, you know, the love was the unconditional agape. That's where I learned, you know, Dr. Brandy just let us know there are 8 types, but I grew up on the main 3. And you had to make a distinction, because even in the church, they had to, you know, truly say that God was the only one that kind of had that unconditional love. But then, you know, I think in this level, well, Dr. Brandy said we're talking about relational. So, but I agree with Darren and what Carlos said about the fact that you do have to set some level of boundaries, because I've seen people in unhealthy relationships, but you hear the adage, but either he loves me or I love him, or, you know, vice versa, you know, what in the constructs of today's society. So, yeah.
So for me personally, I don't follow any particular religion, or I'm not really, I don't ascribe to any God or anything. So speaking from a purely human perspective, there is absolutely no such thing as unconditional love for anybody.
Christian, just for my own, can you just for me, can you say that again? Just because I was doing the data and I wanted to make sure I heard you.
No, I said, you know, I personally don't subscribe to any sort of religion or love from the aspect of a God viewpoint. Yep. But speaking from myself, I don't believe there's absolutely anything close to unconditional love.
Okay.
And just to be clear, the reason why I even mentioned that in that framework is because if you read certain books, I believe that even God has conditions to be accepted and receive his love. I believe there might be one condition at least, but that still makes it a conditional love. So, you know, I that's why I kind of even led with that.
Adam, you have anything to add on that?
I would say we have to first redefine what we think the definition of love. And then if we redefine love, like I think love is used so loosely that then it becomes skewed, and then yes, there become conditions on love. But if you take a deeper step back and look at love and say that it's not love when there is abuse, it's not love when there is control, it's not love with all of those red flags. That's not love. Yes, we call it love, but that's not truly love. And so I think love in and of itself is unconditional. But I think how we define love has to be reworked in order to get to that place of unconditional love. And I think that is really difficult for us as human beings because we're all flawed, right? And that's where we have to apply grace in situations. But so to a lot of other people's point, I think it's really difficult to get to unconditional love as humans. Because we're flawed and we bring all of our flaws to the table. But the act of love itself, the word love itself, is unconditional to me.
Go ahead, Darren.
Just because as you was talking, Adam, I was thinking about like when phrases like "my love has no limits," right? Like, and who's receiving your love, right? Like, is that something that you're giving to someone else in terms of the commitment, the energy, whatever it is, the support? Like, is that where it becomes there's no limit to my love for a person that I want to be with for the long-term longevity? But does that come with conditions in terms of what are you expecting to receive from that person from giving that? And I think that's why I highlighted the definition of like, you might not want the type of love somebody think they're giving you, because that abuse from the person that's giving it, they might be perceiving that as this is the way I show love. I'm trying to show that person on the receiving end how much I care, that I'm willing to display this type of aggressiveness because, you know, not being in control of maybe their emotions, right? Because the word love, it's been, you know, misinterpreted of how it gets applied. But I think if we can agree that it's an action, I think that's where, you know, how that action gets applied or received is up to the person that's, you know, looking at love.
Adam, you want to respond to that?
Well, I want to jump in and just piggyback.
Oh, go ahead, Christian.
Darren. So I think why love absolutely has to have condition is because no two people are ever on the same plane at the same time. We approach love like everything else from our viewpoints, perspectives, experiences, how we interpreted them. So for instance, when I came home from prison this last and final time, I was in a program, a step down program. And every day we were allowed to go to the adjacent park to hang out, get fresh air. And groups of young men would come and visit me from the neighborhood that I had never met. They were generations below me. And the first thing they said to me was, we have this house with that over there. We have this house with that over there. Do you need some money now? Do you need some drugs right now? We can put a gun behind the barrel over there if you need it. And for them, that was the ultimate expression of love that they knew in that moment. And I understood that that's what they were showing me. Because at one point in time, I showed love in the exact same manner. Now, as I began to evolve, I think what we're trying to distinguish now is what is healthy love versus unhealthy love. And how do you begin to see it evolve as you grow together in any relationship? So now that I'm in a relationship with these young men, because I have been where they are with the level of love that I understood that they were expressing, the healthy part of the love that I now know says, how can I get them to see not necessarily what I see, but just a new option for what love could be?
I can dig it.
Yeah, I can dig that.
Nah, I feel that. I think that's the evolution of love, right? And that's you got to a place where you redefined what love was, like where you saw it before. And I've been having a series of like conversations about this with friends and family about trauma, especially in the Black community, and how we bury trauma and we call it love, right? Like we overlook things that shouldn't be overlooked. We don't talk about things that shouldn't be talked about, and we call it because we love each other, but that's not truly love. The pain that is caused in those situations is not love. But in our world, in our perspective, in that moment before we evolve, that is what love looks like, because that is what we've been taught. That is what we've been told. And so until you continuously grow and redefine love and get to a closer place of true definition of love, then no, love will never be unconditional. And I don't know if we ever get there where it's unconditional, but I think we can get close.
Go ahead, James. Look, you look like you were gonna say something.
I mean, so I'm tossed because again, so I'll name, though on an interesting journey, my foundation in love is very Judeo-Christian based. I'm trying to make that as plain and transparent as possible. So I don't know how we got on the road of I think I forgot who first brought up agape, but that unconditional piece. I mean, if we're talking in the relationship space, well, maybe I did or whatever, but in the relationship space, I think there needs to be conditions, and based on what everybody said, there has to be conditions. So in this space, I think I would agree that type of eros love it should come with conditions, because if the love is being displayed in an unhealthy manner, oh, I'm doing this because I love you or something, that's interesting.
Okay. So thinking about kind of love and how we look at it today in a healthy way, how do each of you show, give, or receive love today?
So for me, I guess from a perspective of now being engaged to be married, I'm a lot more focused than I think I've ever been in a relationship on those three things, right? Showing, giving, and receiving, and realizing that I need to show it not only in a way that's comfortable for me, but if I want this partnership to work, I need to show it in a way that she wants it to be shown as well, because I need to speak it in her language. The same thing as receiving it, that sometimes that you don't always receive it the exact way you want to receive it, but do you have enough grace? Do you have enough flexibility to understand where that person is coming from? And I think, having a comfort level with being vulnerable and being open to kind of where love can go. You know, and I think that as people spoke about us having different trauma and starting points and different kind of views that all vary, you know, being able to communicate those things with a partner and agree on what it should look like, at least to have a baseline that we both agree on, and then can work to meet that or exceed it. I find it to be very exciting. So I'm kind of more than just actually doing it, whether it's acts of service and words of affirmation. It's really being focused on the fact that I want to keep getting better at it. At those three things, showing, giving, and receiving love. Because at different times in my life and at different evolution points, it's been harder to do any of those three things, to trust enough to be able to give it or to receive it, to love myself enough to be able to give it and not receive it in a negative way. You know, all those kind of things, being focused on it is really the work that I think people talked about, the work of love, I think are those three verbs that you just spoke of there. So my evolution is just being kind of sharpening that and making it an exercise, a daily exercise if possible, and how I get better at those all the time.
Yeah, I would like to. Yeah, I think that for those three things, they're all centered around communication. I think that having a healthy communication makes it available to know if something's being shown is welcomed or if it's, resisted. To be able to talk everything through, no matter whether it's the showing, the receiving, or the giving. And I think that it varies based upon the status of the relationship. You know, as you're growing and maturing in your own independent lanes, how are you merging those together to see how they're benefiting each other? Right? And I think that healthy communication in the relationship provides the ability to do all three things that you asked for.
To Carlos's point, it is interesting. My path is late. I think most of the folks here would probably be, probably had the first heartbreaks and whatnot, teens, 20s, or whatever. Mine was in my 40s. You know what I'm saying? So it's interesting as far as the ability, Carlos, you said to love yourself enough to give it. And I think you was going to mention something about receive it, but we also have to be to a point that we have to be willing to be open up to trust and love yourself enough to allow yourself to receive it when there's no red flags. There's like you're peering, you're like pinpointing, analyzing, looking at everything, and there's no red flags. It's like really like almost like white. I surrender. And so you also, I think, have to be willing to love yourself enough to also give your heart a chance to, you're not guaranteed. You give your heart in one piece, you're not guaranteed if you get it back, it's going to be received back in one piece and maybe multiple pieces. But you got to love yourself enough to give a chance to love, to be loved.
I agree with that. I think it's a constant evolution, and I think it's difficult coming from different traumatic backgrounds. I remember I had a knee surgery, and I was in Boston by myself without my family, and I didn't trust my friends enough to be there for me because my experience with love was that people had conditions. People showed up, but they wanted something in return. And I remember having these heated blowouts with my friends. And thank God that they loved me through that because they then showed up and they were there, right? And so I had to redefine what it looked like to actually receive true love and say, okay, somebody can possibly love without it being tied to I owe them something later or they're not truly genuinely being there for me. And so for me, I had to really find out who I was, find out the relationships that I wanted in my life, the people who I wanted around, to be able to then say, okay, I can give wholeheartedly. Like, I think for me, love really truly looks like I don't have to question it. Like with the people who I love, I don't question love at all. I don't question what I do for them. I don't question how I go over and above or what they do for me anymore. But it's also a tight-knit group of people who I say that I love. I don't just throw that word around loosely. I don't have a bunch of people in my circle because I know that I'm bringing it at that level of like, just, I'm not questioning it. We're just going to move forward. And I always have this mindset of grace over offense. I always say that, you know, I might be offended by the words that they said, but I know their heart. So therefore, I'm going to give them grace and understand that they probably didn't mean it in the way that I perceived it or heard it. Or even if they did, they love me. I love them and they love me. And so therefore, that's not worth being offended over.
Yeah, I'm gonna piggyback off that last part because I think it's important.
I'm struggling. Go ahead.
So first and foremost, I mean, ultimately, loving yourself is the first and foremost important love to me. Everything flows from there. And what I mean by that is, by loving myself the best that I can, kind of what Adam just alluded to is you're going to be in any sort of relationship where there's going to be tension because you don't understand why somebody did something the way they did it. But the love is what allows you to be open enough to receive it in a different way. It allows you to see what they're doing in a different way. Love is like the ultimate option opener. And for me, when you love yourself, all things stem from that. And when it goes out into the universe, even if I have a disagreement with somebody, the love that I have says, I'm willing to hear it in a new way because I may have based it off of what I had been through and I want to understand it from your perspective. So for me, the way that I show love, I tend to show love by doing the things that I feel as though personally saved my life, which is sharing my story, connecting people, showing them my vulnerabilities in the hopes that it might provoke them to show some of theirs, because I know everyone won't connect to my story, but they might connect to Toy's. They might connect to Carlos's. So that's one of the ways that I show love. When it comes to my son, one of the ways that I show love is by being totally open and there for him whenever he needs me. Another way that I show him love is by showing all of the children and the families in my community love. And that's partly a selfish love for my son and a love for the community, because I figured out a long time ago, I can love my son to death and raise him great. But if the boys around him have the same mentality that I did, then what's to stop them from not loving my son the way that I do? So I had to learn that loving my son meant actually spending a little less time with him, loving others in the hope that we all meet back in the middle and can boost love up a little more. The way that I've learned to receive love, which was probably the hardest part because I always had trust issues. And the biggest thing, I never wanted to open up. I built a brick wall around myself. But one of the ways I've learned to receive love is by understanding that I should not expect from people. Once I start putting conditions and expectations before things got even started, that's when I began to be open to love as a state of being and not just an action word.
But can I ask a question? How I perceive those words, let me be clear. How I perceive those words were, if and we're talking in the realm of relationship in general, but I think you were kind of just talking, you know, just like in general of our approach to love. But I think all of us go into all levels of love with some level of expectation. At least for me, at least to not be harmed, not to be intentionally harmed, to be some level of nurture, to be some level of be supported, and some level of challenge, tough love, you know what I mean, or pushing. I think that all of those loves, and I don't know about the other brothers, but all of those, my experience and how I approach it is all that I go into every type of love with some level of kind of ground rule. I guess it would be ground rule sort of expectations.
Well, I mean, I don't look at it as necessarily I'm going into love. I'm approaching it from the perspective of I already love myself. That's what's going to keep me open because love is always there. So once I'm in the relationship with whoever, it's the love for myself that keeps me open to receiving love from somebody else.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, as Christian was talking and others have talked as well, like I've been thinking about the golden rule, like how that's meant more meaning to me now later in life, like treat others the way you want to be treated.
Yeah.
Like the more I started recognizing how I want to treat myself, it made it easier to deal with interacting with people that I necessarily would have been maybe hesitant, more resistant to. You know, like it's not a problem saying good morning to people, right? Like, and just because you caught eye contact, where before growing up, it could have been a, what are you looking at, right? It was a different type of reaction versus, you know, and so I think that level of maturity, more I love myself, I want others to not approach me in fear of me. I don't want people to be concerned about, like, I don't want problems, right? And in order to display that, then I have to be more vulnerable with how I interact and engage with people. So meeting people from a place that I'm comfortable with is saying, I knew what it was like to live a life of uncomfortableness. Well, it feels a lot better to say the good mornings and the hellos and how are you doing, because it's a whole different space of interacting and engaging with people. So that's what I've been thinking about as folks have been sharing, is about treat people the way you want to be treated and really owning what that looks like in its totality.
And I want to say something to Darren's point, because it's a good point. And what I would say back is, at each level of, take away the love evolution and just put yourself in each of the worlds you found yourself in. You are loving to the best of your capacity, because that is what you knew. It's like, it's no different than the young boys who wanted to give me drugs and guns. That's how they understood love. So from either level, any level that we're on, we're still moving with love. It just grows a little bigger and bigger to accept more and more things. That's been my experience.
I would just say there's a flip side to that too. I agree with that, but I also think the more I found myself loving myself, the less I accept from less kind of things I'll accept from certain people. So, you know, maybe my boundaries are stronger and I won't receive certain energy from certain people, or their opinion matters less, or I want to be left alone, you know, on certain mornings, or I don't say good morning to people because I know I'm in a crappy mood. So I just think it gives us the ability, like everybody described, to kind of move in a different fashion. The more you know yourself, the more you know your own mood, the more you know what you want, the more you know what you want, the easier you're able to maneuver through the world, because you know what you don't want as well, and you can avoid those things and be drawn to the things that you actually want. So I think that's kind of one of the messages, the takeaway that I hear the brothers talking about here.
Is that the adage of you appreciate, you know, when you get the real one, Carlos, with you know, you said you're engaged, like with anything previous, like this is you appreciate more? Is that like that thing of when you finally get it, it's like you kind of appreciate the things that didn't happen before, because this is like it?
I mean, you appreciate the things that didn't happen, but you also appreciate the things that happened. It's like a culmination. For me, it's like a culmination. Like, so all these things, failures and successes, and, you know, have all led to me being at the best that I can be today, you know, and then I'm hoping that this experience where we're talking tonight, improves who I am tomorrow, in all of my relationships, my romantic relationships, and even all the rest of the relationships that I carry as I maneuver through the world. Hopefully it'll put me in a better place, and I'll be able to draw good things from it. So yeah, I mean, it makes me appreciative. You know, I read an article about Russell Williams being his biggest fear losing his wife Ciara, right? And I thought about it, that's the first time it really hit home. Like, you have to really truly value your relationship with somebody if that almost becomes your biggest fear, were to be to lose your counterbalance or a part of yourself as you welcome them in. So that's kind of the mentality that I move with. But with all my relationships, I like to protect the relationships that feed me, that are important to me, that lift me up. So
that's the scary part.
Yeah. Anybody else?
No, I really like what everyone has said, and to a lot of people's point, I think what you can't put love in this cookie cutter box and say that everybody should love the same. And so I don't think, like when James talks about like, oh, but I do have these conditions, I have these things that I won't accept. Well, no, that's just how you love, like how you as an individual, you as a person, by like to Christian's point, loving yourself first, understanding who you are, then you know what love is to you. And so it's not discrediting someone else's love and someone else's relationship because their relationship may not look like mine. There are healthy boundaries, definitely. There are things that are just off the table with love, but how that manifests itself with you and as an individual is based on you, your personality, the growth, the experiences, and to Carlos's point, like the good and the bad, right? The good things that we went through, and because they define us, they help to shape us, they help to mold us. Like I wouldn't go back and take back anything that I've been through from a negative perspective because it's made me a better person. I've looked back on it and I've said, okay, you know what? This is why I want to be better. This is why I want to love better. And this is who I want. It really helped show me who I was. And I was able to reevaluate and say, you know what? That part of you is really good, but that part of you is horrible. So let's go back and fix that part of you.
I like this conversation so much, fellas, like really starting to look at how honesty plays a role in love too, right? Like to be honest with yourself about your feelings and how you feel towards other. When Carlos was just speaking, I was thinking about how often when you're not okay, but you say I'm okay, right? Instead of I'll be okay, or add that extra word in there to maybe stop the conversation from going in a direction that you don't want to entertain, right? Like, so it's like how words matter, where I love myself enough to know that I need space when I'm going through something, right? Like, and how do I communicate that in a way that someone understands I'm not trying to be negative or mean, but out of love, I need to have this space between us right now too, because I'm dealing with self, and how I choose to deal with self may require some alone time, may require these things that someone may not understand because that's not how they deal with whatever they're dealing with, right? But being true to oneself is an act of love. And sometimes people don't understand the acts you take to make sure that you're your best self when giving to others. So I think that the honesty is what I'm hearing is deeply a part of the word love, because there's a lot of truth that's coming out. Like as maturity, as perspectives change, you get a deeper understanding of a truth about yourself and how you want to go about, giving to others as well as receiving.
I agree. And I think what we're kind of going into now is more like of the relationships, of intimate relationships.
Christian said, I'm good now.
And what's interesting is I love that we're all silently saying with love, there comes logic. There comes logic. You got to have love and logic. They go together. That's how you know yourself enough to step away. That's how you know certain things have received a certain way and you adjust. So James brought up something interesting when he said something to Carlos about, well, do you regret now that you found your life partner, your fiance? Do you feel as though things before that were just mess ups, mistakes possibly? Are you thankful for them? Me, I'm thankful for everything that I've gone through, because I truly believe I wouldn't be right here talking to you right now if I didn't.
Agreed.
When it comes to, so right now I have a life partner, and I think we also need to bring in the word compatibility. So right. For me, I know there are millions of beautiful, able-bodied women that I would probably be attracted to in so many different contexts. But what I started learning through the journey was my first mistake was looking for the love instead of being open to receiving the love, the romantic love. Every time I looked for it, searched for it, and thought I found it, quote unquote, if I had 10 foundational principles, somebody could have met one of them, 4 of them, 7 of them, 8 of them. But no matter what, because she and I did not click on those foundational principles, it didn't work in the long run. And I found ways and excuses and adjustments to do to try to say, well, we're strong over here, weak over here. This strong part will eventually outweigh that weak part. And that's not how it ever turned out for me. There was always the thorn in the side. So it's like, for instance, I knew that whatever woman I ended up with for the rest of my life would have had to gone through serious trauma just like me, not in the exact same way, because part of being in my relationship is we're very relatable to each other and each other's experiences. For me, that's very important. The way my life shaped me, I sometimes like extra attention. She likes to give extra attention. We're compatible there. We both want to own homes. We both want to own rental properties. We both want to do community work. Her as a clinician, me as a mentor, these things line up on so many different levels. And for so many of the women that I've dealt with, it didn't line up all the way. And eventually it was like Jenga. Eventually that one thing toppled everything. So now when I see the love that I have for my partner and for everybody else, I see where the clear-cut logic, the knowledge of self, all mixes in together.
I think that's that evolution piece that we were all talking about. It's the evolution around just experience. Just that's why I was saying. So I think I'm glad Carlos brought the highlight of not only appreciating the present and not denying the benefit of the past, but just, I don't know. It for me, it's like I'm at a point now where I'm taking, I guess I'm in real time, I'm getting this. I'm taking what I learned about myself because I'm interesting. And so I'm cognizant of my crap. So I'm like, where I would usually like, or whatever. Now I'm like, just, chill or whatever. So it's interesting. I'll just leave that there. The whole process of the whole thing, is interesting. And it being a late bloomer, that's a whole another thing. But if I could ask maybe one of the other brothers if does your list change as you get older? Did your list go down as you got older?
I think that when you start recognizing what you bring to the, like sometimes uncovering your own crap is a revelation in itself, right? Like I recognize that at time, especially in this journey, because it was so new, that I didn't take time to take into consideration how my who I was dealing with at the time, how their day was going. I was so excited about everything that I was being exposed to. I didn't take the second to say, how was your day? How has your, what's been going on? Like, and that over time, I had to recognize that about myself to be like, wow, like I'm all over the place. I got 50,000 projects going on. So when I come home, I want to throw it all up to my partner, not even once thinking about like, well, what was her day like? What was her like? Not even taking that into consideration. So little things like that was something that I had to take into account with the next relationship to be like, I want to be conscious of these things, even though I still want to throw up my day, but I have to pause just to be able to say, hold on, I do care. I am concerned. I want to know what yours is about too. How do I balance that type of interaction throughout the relationship, right? So I like what Christian highlighted is the compatibility. Sometimes we try to make something work that just ain't gonna work, right? And I remember starting a lot of relationships off by saying, if we can't be friends, why even explore a relationship with a title? Because it's just not going to work. Like because there's expectations that come with the title of boyfriend, of girlfriend, of significant another. Like, but friend, then you accept me for who I am and I accept you for who you are. Let's start there. And getting to know one another to see if we're going to be compatible or suitable for one another for moving into a deeper relationship. So that's something that, also, again, this is a great conversation, fellas. We definitely don't do this enough in our community. Just
that's what DeeDee's Cry is here for.
Shout out to Dee.
Yeah, we're gonna keep having these conversations. And I heard something from a couple of you where you're talking about, you're thankful for everything that has happened in your life because it's made you who you are and how you look at love. But I'd like to ask, if you could, though, if you had a crystal ball and you could go back to your younger self, what would you tell yourself about love? About how your process has been?
Patience is part of the process. Like, you can't rush love. I don't think,
On that, yeah. 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 Sorry. I had him.
I mean, I guess it's a difficult question, but I would say that really like defining what love is for you, and then holding true to that, right? Like in my past, I've overlooked huge red flags that I knew about, because my definition of love at that time was off. And I guess it goes back to the evolution point, but my definition of love was off. So I said, well, we're in love. So this red flag I overlooked. I looked at it like looking over that red flag was grace when it really wasn't grace. It was just a red flag. And so I was like, identify those red flags, and because like I said, I'm very big on giving grace. I think that's hugely important in a relationship, but that's the right relationship, the right connection, right? Like I can give grace to the person, but when that person is wrong, I can give grace all day and it mean nothing.
That's a deep question. Like, what would you tell yourself? I guess I would tell myself, I don't know if this is along the same lines, but I would kind of challenge, I would tell myself to challenge all the things that kind of pop culture had taught me about what I thought love was. So I remember my mother teaching me about the birds and the bees. She gave me a book when I was 11, and my father was present in the household, and I had an older brother, but neither one of them had to talk with me. So everything that I figured out about love and sex and things like that was either through my peer groups or pop culture. And it's very pervasive, and a lot of different things come at you that you have to kind of then sort through what you actually like, what you really like, what's really important to you versus what people have told you is supposed to be important, whether that's the looks of your partner, the character of your partner, how they behave, the behavior of your partner. So just being able to challenge those and kind of, I guess, being more open to having my own strong values. It's kind of the advice I would give myself, but it would be tough not to. I don't want to, I want to be Doc and Marty in the DeLorean and change something in the past that would undo where I am in the present. So I might just sit and watch, just be an observer.
I kind of like what Carlos just said, because I agree. The butterfly effect, you don't want to go messing with fate. But I think the first and foremost thing I would say is I wouldn't say anything. I would listen to what his understanding of love is at that time and at each moment. So I would first of all listen to myself. And if I'm going back with the healthy state of mind that I have now, once I heard how I used to receive love and want love, I would begin to try to show myself a new way of thinking, and I would be 100% consistent with it through all the pushing away, through all the FUs, through all the get out my faces, through all the you're trying to hustle me. I would remain consistent, and I would open my ears to listen, and I would also open my feelings, my heart, my intellect to listen as well, because your ears don't pick up on a lot of things. I would watch my actions. My actions showed a lot of what I was going through. I would go back and I would observe. I would listen. I would respect where they are, and we would build from there.
James, Darren?
I would probably just simply say guard your heart. Guard your heart. According to my experiences, I would say guard your heart. And that's just not with the, Eros type of relationships, period. Just guard your heart.
Yeah, I know I started off by saying, like, be patient. Patience is part of the process. I think also I would tell a younger self to be open to love. I was too busy focused on other things versus focusing on love. And when I finally decided to want to focus on love, I thought I can create the partner that I wanted versus trying to be with the person I wanted. I thought that I would have to create the soulmate versus run into your soulmate or find your soulmate. Thought that, based upon a very minstrel line of what I was looking for in a woman, it was more solely based on physical, not necessarily mental connection, emotional connection. It was all physical. And I think what Carlos highlighted was like how pop culture influenced that type of understanding of what a healthy relationship is versus not. and I didn't have a lot of experience with necessarily the healthy relationships at that time of growing up. Not with someone, a significant other, per se.
Since we're talking about our younger selves, and with DeeDee's Cry, we always want to think about how we can help the community and how we can help others. I just wonder, with the time, because we're running short on time, but what would you tell your children or your nieces, your nephews, or kids you mentor in the neighborhood, or other young people? What would you share with them about love?
Oh, I would share with them the truth. I mean, that's kind of what I've found as a mentor over the last 20 years, and as an uncle and kind of a big brother to people. I've always thought the most powerful thing I could share about love is the truth, and kind of also doing it through example. How I maintain my relationships with people. I want that to kind of be the beacon, or like the mascot of my love. Right, our relationship should embody how I love people. And so really just being honest about my successes, honest about my failures and my missteps. And because I think a lot of people can learn from example and other people's experience without having to experience it themselves. So having these kind of dialogues where we're, as my man Christian says, where we're breaking cycles and we're challenging what has been the norm and letting people create their own norms, I think is the best way to create healthy communities and healthy conversations with those around us. And like I think it was Darren said earlier, it all comes back to honesty. The more honest we can be with ourselves, I think the more honest we can be with others, and that improves all of our relationships, both in household, both in romance, both in community. So that honesty within ourselves, I think, is the key to unlocking everything else as we talk about feelings that are in our community and feelings that men carry every day and don't have the opportunity to talk about like this. So thank you again for this opportunity.
I agree with Carlos. I do a lot of mentoring in church and schools and architecture, and I'm just very big on transparency. So I want them to see the things that I've been through. There's nothing that's off the table. There's nothing that's taboo that when I mentor youth that we can't talk about, because I want them to understand that, yeah, my perspective, my experiences may not be the same as yours. But I've had my own experiences, and so your experiences are valid. So you don't have to bottle them up. You don't have to think that you're alone and going through something. And to Christian made a point earlier about when he was talking to his younger self, and it was all about empathy, right? It was all about emotional intelligence, having this understanding of being empathetic of others' experiences, and so. I would tell them to just embrace every part of who you are, because in culture, I know that growing up, I was bullied for not fitting in, and it took me a long time to understand myself and understand that I was valuable, right? That I was okay being exactly who I am and unapologetically who I am. And so just teaching them to love themselves early so they can walk through life unapologetically themselves. Because then that helps them love outwardly.
What I tend to, with the youth, I think everyone's gonna, touch on it, but it's that honesty, like being transparent and honest with the youth about, the issues that they're experiencing or the issues that you've experienced, in order to help, provide them a perspective as they're going through their journey. I know at times that empathy is definitely needed, given that what exists in this day and age didn't necessarily exist in our day and age, right? We didn't have the advantage of social media, the different influences that brings, access to a worldwide network, right? Like, it's just so much more that can influence the youth's perspective of the issues that they're experiencing. But I think giving them the honest feedback when they're bringing it to your attention, and it's from a place of love and empathy, I think it will help guide them with whatever decision they're going to make as it relates to that issue.
I agree with what everybody's saying. And So like I said, usually when I approach, so first and foremost, if we're talking about younger people, even peers, I mean, the first thing for me is the ultimate way to begin that love in that relationship is by meeting them where they are, knowing what they're going through, then basing a plan off of that, instead of approaching them with, I have a plan for you, you need to adjust to it. So for me, when I try to instill love, tell me the question one more time, because it changed in my head since people were talking.
What would you tell other young people, your son, your nieces, your nephews, kids in the neighborhood? What would you tell them about love?
So the first thing, so I think we all said it. First of all, it's honesty, authenticity, relatability, and it's accountability. Something that when I talk to youth, especially that came from the walk that I came from, I put love in the context of accountability. That part of loving yourself is being accountable to the things you may have done because of situations that were created for you to fail in. There's a blame on a larger society. And then I tell Carlos all the time, me and Carlos always talk about self-accountability. And when I realized when I was in prison the last and final time, it was around year 6, and so many of the younger generations were coming in behind me. And all of them were still trying to aspire to be like me. So I had to, in essence, reshape my understanding of love. And so when I deal with them, I let them know that part of that journey of love, first of all, it's going to be a long journey. It's going to be a journey of inwardness. It's going to be a journey of accountability, but also it's a journey of patting yourself on the back for all your successes. That's how I approach young people when I think of love in the context of experiences that were like mine.
I would say here of late, I've been on this road of even letting love move when you're frustrated, letting love move when you're angry. And so I would mimic, I believe, what Adam said about being your authentic self and loving who you are, being true to yourself, setting boundaries, in general, in love in all aspects, and as well as having balance to trust, to be loved in general, but then also, I guess, on a, I'm 50, so I could be talking to a 25-year-old and that be a younger person. So I would say, and they may be in a mindset of getting in a relationship, I would say love themselves enough to, yes, be balanced and consider receiving the love as well, with, setting their boundaries and appreciating who they are in themselves. But even in general, even in frustration and anger, in places of advocacy and activism and disagreement, exhale for a second and remember about the foundation and the root of the presumed reason why we're all doing what we're doing. Love being the foundational thing I believe will move us all forward.
I just want to add part of, I feel like we haven't really touched upon it, but we sort of alluded to it, but part of loving yourself and part of loving others is knowing your limits. And that's within the mentoring, that's within anything, is knowing your limits, because there's certain things that may come to your attention that you're just not ready to hear. That
I was gonna say, and accepting your limits, not only knowing them, but then be okay with them, right?
100%. Because the last thing you want to do is stick in a relationship with, on any level, and you're repeatedly being triggered and at the same time being asked to guide somebody through it. It's not a good combination, especially for you in the long run. But I think the limits and accepting your limits are a huge part of love. And I'll tell you how. I truly believe in it takes a village. My son recently started Taekwondo 2 months ago. We have an elliptical in the house. Me and my son have fell into this routine where he sits in his room. I sit in the living room and we do our own thing. I can go into the room. It's time to work out. It's time to do this. And he'll do it, but he'll do it half-ass. I've come to accept that I'm not the physical exercise motivator for my son. Exercise isn't my personal thing. I could get into it a little bit, but the Taekwondo street down the school, the Taekwondo school down the street plays that part for him. And in turn, it makes us better for each other. So I understood my limits. And by understanding and accepting them, I knew that I knew the option of reaching out to call on somebody else to help my son became an option for me to do.
To Darren's point, man, we don't do this often. And I think we got to definitely, knowing Toy, we're going to need to get together and do this again. And Dr. Brandy's going to wrap us up. But at some point we need to do this again in this space. Go ahead, Dr. Brandy.
As we wrap up, though, anybody have any last comments on love or even just on this conversation and how you may approach it differently or think about it differently? Briefly, fellas. Briefly.
To be real brief, I love the title of it called Men Have Feelings Too. And the reason why I like that title is because I think both men and women in our society have been conditioned to see men in only one way, in a very limited emotional state, and that's usually anger. And it encourages men to look into their emotions beyond anger. We have so many more. We're full of every emotion, just like any other being. So I just love the title and exploring those emotions with men, I think is important.
Yeah, thank you again, DeeDee, for convening us. Thank you, Dr. Brandy. Thank you, Robin. Always Java for just facilitating this conversation between us. I think it's much needed, long overdue. I want to highlight what folks were talking about at the tail end around self-care. I remember at the very beginning stages of this journey for me was around hearing the word selfish and starting to look at it as self-first, meaning that it's okay to put yourself first in order to make sure you're able to be there for others. So thank you again for just convening and allowing me to be a part of this space with everyone else.
Adam?
I echo the same things. It's a much needed topic, especially in our communities, especially as men. There's so many things that are put on us as men where we're not allowed to express our feelings. We're not allowed to openly talk about love. We're not allowed to say, I love you to other men, but just breaking those mindsets, breaking down those thought processes and really diving deep into this conversation is extremely important. And thank you guys for having me. And I really enjoyed you brothers and meeting you guys and understanding your experiences.
Likewise,
Quick apology. Toy, I keep saying DeeDee and I keep forgetting that's your sister, but it throws me off because it's the organization name. But Toy, thank you so much for convening us. Thank you.
You're not the only one, Darren.
Yeah.
Everyone does it. James does it. Everyone does it.
That's good. That's good branding. That's good branding.
Yes.
James,
Branding, they're going through you. So yes, thank you.
James, any last comments?
I would just say, love is what you call it? It's cool. It's in the thing of shut up, Carlos. Because
I thought you were gonna say complicated again. I was like,
I'm not saying complicated. Love is just
James is going through some things, obviously.
Okay. I'm gonna text you later.
No, y'all ain't, because this is the last thing I had to do, and I'm off on. Listen, it's the love weekend, and we'll leave that at that.
Oh, it's the love weekend. Okay.
All right. We're gonna have to do an after dark. Men have feelings after dark. Okay.
Everything everybody was saying. Toy.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank
Dr.
you.
Brooks. I tell everybody about you, Dr. Brooks, just so you know. Like the best facility. They need you facilitating so many official things in this city. I swear. Robin, thank you as always. But fellas, thank you. There's nothing like seeing men of color up here telling their personal truths, being vulnerable, being what is, to me, being real. That's what being real is to me. So in essence, just thank you again. And I've been really approaching things from this lately. Be brave enough to fail at something new. And love can encompass all of that.
Yeah. And so just to wrap up, I'd like to thank everyone, our panelists, James, Darren, Carlos, Christian, Adam. Thank you so much. Robin for hosting us, Toy for being the glue and bringing us all together for this event. Again, this is sponsored and put on by DeeDee's Cry. If you want to support us, we are always looking for support from individuals like yourself, listening, watching. You can go to our website, www.deedescry.com. Also, as the Director of Operations for the Roxbury Unity Parade, I would be amiss if I didn't mention Roxbury Unity Parade as well, coming up this summer. If we are able to be in person safely, then we will. If not, we will caravan around the city and of Roxbury, celebrating Roxbury this July, third Sunday in July, 2021. But thank you all for being here with us tonight. I wish all of you a wonderful night. Happy Black History Month again. Happy complicated Valentine's Day. President's Day, long weekend, and just, go in love, everyone. And so thank you all. And is that any other things we have to touch upon?
Yes, starting next Saturday, DeeDee's Cry will be, what is it called? DeeDee's Cry Children's Social and Emotional Support, and that will be with Miss Crystal and our very own James Hills, and that will be every Saturday at 11 o'clock, so tune in and look out for that. So we're going to give parents supports and strategies to help them with their children. Yes.
Yep. And if you currently don't like or follow the DeeDee's Cry Facebook page, you want to do that right now.
Because and if you currently love DeeDee's Cry page but don't follow it, hit the like.
Hit the like, because we'll post about our upcoming events, just like this one, because we're definitely probably going to have a part 2, like for sure. So definitely follow, like the page, go on Twitter. You can find us on there, on Instagram. And again, the website, www.deedescry.com. So good night, everyone. Happy Black History. Happy Valentine's Day. Go in love. Peace and blessings.
Good night, everyone.
Have a great night, everybody.
Good night.
See ya.
Bye. Are we still